So welcome to Books and Brews Light. I believe we're on number 19. And I am here with Brook Allen, who is a historical fiction author. So, Brook, I would like you to introduce yourself and your books to our audience.
Certainly. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. So I write historical fiction, and my first three works were a trilogy on the life of Marcus Antonius, better known to all people as Mark Antony. And it's called the Antonius Trilogy. And the first one is called Antonius, Son of Rome, and deals with Antony's life from 10 years old approximately to, I think he's 27 years old when he first meets Cleopatra. And the second of the series is called Antonius Second in Command, and this is when he has his partnership with Julius Caesar, and of course it includes the assassination of Caesar and the battle afterward that Shakespeare wrote about in Julius Caesar in his play. The third one is Antonius, Soldier of Fate, and that includes his big romance with Cleopatra and his marriage to Octavia, his enemy's sister. And so there's plenty of drama there.
I would not want my enemy's sister in bed with me.
Oh, I tell you what,
I would not feel
that,
safe.
and you know, he deals with that. It was a great series, and I've enjoyed writing it so much. But when COVID hit, you know, I needed something new to write about, and I figured I'm going to need armchair material because I can't travel. And so I decided to write on a local subject, but it's pretty interesting. It's a piece of American history based on the life of Julia Hancock Clark. And Julia Hancock lived in Fincastle, which is a very small town close to where I live in my county. She wound up marrying explorer William Clark of the Lewis and Clark expedition. So that's the book that just came out this past March, and the one I'm, you know, heavily marketing right now. And it was an absolute joy to write. I got to visit the inside of the home where they were married in.
Is that something that's open to the public, or did you?
Actually, no.
Okay.
It's a private home.
How did that happen?
Still, yeah, how did that happen? I teach locally here in Botetourt County, Virginia, and one of my students was the young man whose parents owned the home. So they invited me in. Yeah, so I was able to go visit several times, and I've been on top of, underneath it. It's just a magnificent historical home, and really beautiful inside.
That's amazing.
And,
do you write about that on your blog or show pictures, or did they not really want their home?
Yeah, actually, I do have. Yeah, I do have some photos of the house exterior. I guess I'm trying to honor their privacy because it is still privately owned, and I'm not showing interior too much. But there are a few pictures. If you'd like, I can share them with you and send them on.
I would love to see that. Yeah. Speaking of historical houses, I happen to know somebody, this was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, who was working on a project to refurbish a house in Wisconsin that was known as the, what was it known as? The Summer White House, because Roosevelt and I believe it was Woodrow Wilson both would take their families up when it was hot in DC. They would take them up to this house, and I think it's either Hayward or Frederick, Wisconsin, and that's where they would stay. And so this person I knew a multi-millionaire who buys up historic properties like that have just kind of been forgotten and neglected. And then he just kind of collects them, you know, like other people collect cats or knickknacks or whatever. He collects historic properties. And so my friend was on the team trying to help refurbish it, and he took me for a tour. And it was just incredible to be in this house that had the families and 2 presidents. And some of their old stuff was just lying around. One of the, was it a buffalo head? I believe it's a buffalo head, just lying on a table there, left behind. Presumably that Roosevelt had hunted. So yeah, that's an amazing thing. And is the house, I mean, that's an old house. That's, well over 200 years old.
Mhm.
And it's standing, it's in good shape.
Yeah, it really is. There was a fire, a roof fire in
Hmm.
1811, and so George Hancock, Julia's father, sold the property at that time and moved to a second property he had in Elliston, which is about 35 miles from here. And
Okay.
so anyway, the kitchen, though, to my knowledge, I don't know, nobody is clear on how much of the property was actually damaged, if it was
Hmm.
completely burned to the ground or what. But we know that the kitchen did survive whatever
Hmm.
happened, which is kind of unusual. It's usually kitchen fires, right?
You
But this
think,
was a roof
right?
fire. And so the kitchen survived, and it has its original gorgeous, huge fireplace, where meals were cooked.
Hmm.
And so I have a feeling that the home that stands now has been altered in quite a few ways. I would
Hmm.
imagine that most of the upper stories were completely lost, and possibly some of I guess the first floor does survive,
Uh-huh.
from the original. And it really is cool. They have the original locks on the door and things like that, all of that stuff is so amazing. It was,
Right.
I think the lock was cast in England, I think in the 18th century
Hmm.
sometime. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
So before we get too deep into the history, I was excited to read that you're a music educator.
I am.
And so I was too for 32 years.
Oh
So
my
my,
gosh.
yeah, my degree is in music. Now I taught in a school for 5 years, but mostly I've taught private music lessons. And so I was curious what you do.
Yeah, I teach in Botetourt County in public school system, and I have a large rural school called Greenfield Elementary,
Hmm.
and I've been there for this is going to be my 20th year. It's hard to believe. I can't believe I've been doing it that
Time
long.
flies. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was your major instrument?
Well, voice actually.
Okay.
I studied voice, but now I mostly play piano and
Hmm.
recorder. Believe it or not, I'm a
Yeah.
recorderist. I
You
love
know,
early music.
that would be, if I had more time, I would love to really get good at recorder and play in a medieval ensemble.
Yeah, I
And
just love the stuff.
yeah, I've got I think it's the tenor one. It's maybe about so big. Um,
I
I don't know
can't
if
see
that
you,
shows up.
unfortunately.
Okay. Well,
I'm
I
so
can see
sorry.
you. Well, imagine the one-armed man showing how big his fish is.
There you go.
It's about that big. So that's really neat. My main instrument was trombone, but
Oh, wow.
from
Okay.
yeah, from seventh grade on, my grandmother had given me a little bit of money, so I bought a new instrument and how to play the instrument book every year, and taught myself to play most of the instruments. So
That's great.
yeah, so that was really neat to hear. What got you from Cleopatra and Mark Anthony to where you are now?
Well, again, it was COVID. I knew I was going to have an armchair project. And
Hmm.
so I decided to, try this. And I just fell in love with the storyline. There was just so much to research. I even went to St. Louis at one point for about
Hmm.
3 days, kind of a fast visit, and
Right.
was able to actually visit some of the Clark family collection, which
Really?
is, yeah, it's housed at the Missouri Historical Society Library and Research Center. And
Hmm.
so I had to make reservations with the archivist there. And in the
Hmm.
morning, I did a tour of some of the artifacts, including the one portrait they have of Julia Hancock that
Hmm.
is still with us. I got to see a miniature of William Clark's and her daughter. I got to
Hmm.
see the baby cap that she made and embroidered. It was just wonderful. But
It's
even
amazing to
I
be
know,
able
but
to put
even
history that?
Even better than that, in the afternoon, the archivist got all of these huge boxes out for me, and I got to see William Clark's actual elkskin journal. And I held some of the documents actually in my bare hands. They didn't even have me wear gloves. It was
Oh,
such an
that's
incredible
amazing.
experience. So yeah,
Yeah.
I even handled a letter from Meriwether Lewis to William Clark that was actually addressed to Fincastle, Virginia, when he was courting Julia.
That's
So that
so
was really
neat.
special.
Well, I was kind of curious. You live in a state that's full of history. Was
Mhm.
this the thing that was closest historically, or was it a subject that you had already had an interest in?
Well, it was just crazy. It was just nearby, physically nearby.
Mhm.
Fincastle is basically almost next to Greenfield. In fact,
Okay.
the opening of my story takes place on the property that belonged to the Greenfield plantation owned
Hmm.
by a neighbor of the Hancocks. So, back then there were no roads and everything, everything was dirt road. And, plots of land were just enormous, hundreds and hundreds of acres. And
Right.
so, yeah, it was just so handy that, I found this story and it was so
Hmm.
close by. It just
Right.
worked out beautifully.
Yeah,
So,
my parents, I grew up in the military, and so we did spend time in Virginia. We lived in Norfolk and we lived in Fairfax. And so my parents took us to a lot of historical sites in those
yeah,
years and wherever we lived, really. So, do you have a reading ready?
yes, I sure do. Absolutely.
And
I'm going to give just a little bit of background, if I may. If I
okay,
may.
but I wanted to ask you first, since this
Yeah.
is Books and Brews, what would you be drinking with Lewis and Clark? Or for a book about Lewis and Clark?
Good question. I think, let's see, I might have to have a small ale. Back
That was
then,
my thought
small
too.
ale was, yeah, you
Right.
definitely in the Revolutionary period and the early Americana
Mhm.
period, early Republican period of America. I think that's probably what they would have been drinking. So,
That's what I would have been drinking if I had felt like going out to the store. I figure that's
right.
probably a lot of what they drank on that trip, that
I have a
epic
feeling, and I,
journey.
I would imagine a lot of it was home brewed.
Mhm. I would think it
So.
would have to be at that time. Yeah. So anyway, go ahead with the introduction.
Sure. West of Santa Lane takes place mostly in Fincastle, Virginia. There is a section of it that takes place in Missouri. And so this particular reading is going to be still in Virginia. Christmas has just passed, and Julia is waiting frantically for William Clark to arrive so that they can get married. And she is waiting impatiently, thinking perhaps it's him. She hears beats coming up the roadway, and she looks out, but it's a messenger, and it's a soldier who is bringing her a wedding gift. So here we go. Christmas passed with no sign of Will, and for me there was a saturating profusion of whens. When would he arrive? When would the wedding be? When would we depart for St. Louis? For nearly all of December, I listened for riders approaching the house. Whenever I heard hoofbeats, I ran to the window. When that happened on a blustery, chilly late afternoon, I set Master Shakespeare aside, scrambling to the window, wiping frost from the pane. Not him, not yet. Instead, it was an armed soldier with a padlocked saddlebag, making me wonder what sort of official business he had here at Santalane. By the time I reached the front door, he had dismounted and was busy unlocking the bag, drawing out a small parcel nearly wrapped. While I swung open the front door, Mama was calling for Meg to warm some tea on the stove for the traveler. Greetings, miss, the young man said. I'm looking for Miss Julia Hancock. My heart thudded. I'm Miss Hancock. Miss Hancock, I've ridden from Washington City to convey warmest regards from President Jefferson, he announced, climbing the stairs. This here is a wedding gift from the president himself. He presented the parcel and I accepted, utterly astonished. I wandered into the library's privacy with it. Please, Mamma invited, bustling to the entrance towards the soldier. It's freezing outside. Do go around the side of the house to the kitchen. We've warmed some tea for you, and my woman Meg will see you're given a hot meal before you continue on. Many thanks, ma'am. That's greatly appreciated. Once she'd shut the door, Mamma came up behind me, where I was admiring the packaged gift. What is it? She asked, insistently peering over my shoulder. I don't know. Well, open it, child. I peeled away the outer layer of wrapping carefully to find a smoothly sanded and polished flat-latched box of walnut with a crisp note of official presidential stationery attached. Oh, Julia, he's written you a private note. Blinking at my own disbelief, I lifted the folded stationery, feeling the raised print under my fingertips. It was engraved with the presidential seal and Jefferson's name. Beneath was his message. The author of our Declaration of Independence had written me in his own bold script. My dearest Miss Hancock, I'm sure these are hardly words to express the delight and happiness you must feel as you celebrate the advent of your marriage. If William Clark has chosen you as his bride, then I can only assume what an upright and purposeful woman you must be. Therefore, I beg you to accept this small gift representing the sentiments I hold not only of your worthy person, but of Clark's esteemed service and character, all of which I hold dear. May your days together be many and full of joy. I am indeed in your service and in the service of our beloved country, Thomas Jefferson, President of the United States. Oh, Julia, open it, Mamma fussed again. In disbelief, I set the note aside upon one of our library tables. Using my finger, I slid the box's delicate brass latch up to the right. The lid released, and I opened it the rest of the way, gasping. Beneath a protective flap of emerald satin was a magnificent brooch of carnelian and gold, and on either side were displayed matching earrings. They were exquisite, and not even my parents had ever gifted me such an extravagance. I stared at Mamma, shaking my head, stunned. How can I accept this? It's far too rich for me. Ever so gently, she placed her hands on my face and whispered, Daughter, you are marrying into greatness, and even our president recognizes that fact. You will accept it with humility, with dignity, and wear these baubles in St. Louis with pride, where people will be amazed that the president sends you such. I was humbled. What an incredible time this was. A year full of newness, a year of firsts, like receiving gifts from the president.
That's a wonderful reading. And I thought you did a great job bringing out her character with just the details, like the fact that she's uncomfortable being given something that expensive. So did she know, at the time she married him, did she know he would be making this journey across America?
Well, actually, he had already done it. This was
Oh,
after
he
he,
had. Okay.
yeah, yeah, he and Lewis returned in 1806 in
Mhm.
September, and this was in November of 1807.
Okay,
They,
so
yeah,
did she know him before he went on this trip?
yeah, this is kind of uncanny. They met kind of by accident. She
Mhm.
was riding a horse with her cousin, and the horse balked at a little stream, and the girls were basically stuck. They couldn't make the horse go anywhere. So all of a
Mhm.
sudden, there's some noise behind them, and on this almost deserted path, here comes
Mhm.
this redheaded gentleman and his slave, his Black American slave
Mhm.
on a mule. And so it turned out he was William Clark, and that's how they met. And what's funny is the other girl on the horse with her, her cousin,
Mhm.
wound up being his second wife after Julia passes away.
Really? Oh,
Yes,
very
isn't that crazy?
interesting. Did Julia die young?
Unfortunately, yes, she died when she was 28. Yeah. She gave Clark
Really?
5 children. She gave Clark 5
5
children.
children.
Yeah.
in a very short time. Did
Yeah.
she die in childbirth, or what did she die of?
No. Um, they're not 100% certain. Most of the documents that we have kind of point to possibly breast cancer, but if so,
Okay.
she certainly had it very young in life, you know.
Right,
But of
right.
course, back then, nothing could be done. But, it could be complications of mastitis or things like that too, because you can
Mhm.
imagine she probably did her share of breastfeeding. So,
Right, right.
anyway.
That's an amazing story, and so then he went to her cousin, which from what I've read historically, it seems to me that was kind of common, or at least not uncommon. Like today, we would find that a little strange, but I've read a lot of stories like
Mm.
that.
Yeah, and,
And
she was married at 16, and that was the norm back then. My word,
mhm,
some poor girls were married at 13, 14 that I've read about,
right, right, very
in the
young.
1800s. Yeah.
So
So,
I only learned from reading a little bit about your book that William Clark owned slaves. I had never heard that before.
yeah.
And as anyone who goes to your blog or your page will quickly find out, Julia felt very differently about that. How did they end up resolving that, or did they?
Well, in my story, it is historical fiction and,
Hmm.
trying to give this woman some kind of, character. You have to
Hmm.
make certain things up. And
Right.
so I decided that would be a really tasteful and interesting conflict to have in their marriage.
Hmm.
And so it's not ever completely resolved, but they come to an understanding about it. And
Hmm.
Julia is able in my story to do some very positive things for Will's people, as he calls them.
Hmm.
And so yeah, it's always the elephant in the room in this period of American history.
Right.
And we have to address it honestly up front.
Yep.
Um, there it
I
is.
fully agree.
Yeah,
Right,
and I
right.
I hate to
Because
say it, but Clark was not known for his kindness to his slaves. Um,
oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
yeah, yeah, it's really tragic. So,
Hmm.
it's an interesting story, and it took a lot of effort to really pull his character out and try to
Hmm.
rescue him, from some of the obvious cruelty that he did,
Right,
involve himself in with his, slaves. It was
right.
tragic. It's
So
tragic.
what was he like from your research? What was he like as a man? Was he just cruel to everybody or only to
Mhm.
them?
Yeah, I hate to say, but I think it was mostly to Black Americans.
Okay.
I've actually read letters that he wrote to his brother where he actually admits beating some of his people, as he calls
Hmm.
them. Um, and that actually, the usage of that particular terminology was very helpful to me because I was
Hmm.
able to capture some of William Clark, the real William Clark, by
Right.
using that term, his people. He would call my
Hmm.
people,
Right.
and
Right.
we do know some of the names of his slaves, and so I was
Hmm.
able to use that. And to be honest, my favorite character in the book is one of the Black slaves. Her name is Chloe.
Hmm.
And, she turned out to be just a delightful character in the book, and, she and Julia have a very special relationship.
And
So
was that something that historically you had some idea of her character, or did you entirely make up her character?
no, Chloe was a real slave in the service of William
Hmm.
Clark, and, we don't know an enormous amount about her, but she did have a young daughter named Rachel, and Rachel
Hmm.
plays a very prominent role in the story too when they get to
Okay.
St. Louis. Yeah.
Did any of them make this journey with him to the West Coast?
Well, actually, yes, one of them did, and he was typically what happened in American families, well, I guess I should say, wealthy American families,
Mhm,
is a son was given a servant, a slave, as a
mhm,
child, and that slave was kind of his playmate up until they become of age, and by about age 12 is when typically slaves were either sent to the fields or to their particular occupation, whatever that was
Mhm.
going to be. And York was William Clark's childhood slave friend and grew up with him and became kind of his servant, his private
Mhm.
slave who helped dress him, who helped him at the table or when they went out, probably saddled his horse, that type of thing.
Right.
And
Okay.
so York was the one he took with him to the Pacific. And York went all the way to the Pacific. And he actually had probably more freedom um, during the Corps of Discovery journey, those 3
Uh-huh.
years, that he had ever had in his life. And when he came
Right.
back, I think he kind of hoped that Clark would have, had the grace to free him. And
Mhm.
that was not the case. In fact, it really embittered their relationship toward one another. And
The
when
the
Clark
fact that
eventually,
Clark the
yeah,
fact that Clark did not free him?
yeah.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
here, all of the men in Lewis and Clark's company were being given plots of land across the
Mhm.
Missouri, west of the Missouri.
Mhm.
Um, the only thing York got was some extra rations.
Oh, how
And that's-
generous.
Yeah, isn't that nice? Yeah. So, there is a huge, I guess, emphasis on some of the slaves in the story. And
Mhm.
they make for amazing characters. I just fell in love with them. I just did. Uh,
That's very easy to do, and I think there's something unique about it being a historical character. I mean, for me, I'm in medieval Scotland in the time of
mhm.
Robert the Bruce, and I used to always tease my husband back when he wasn't my husband that I was really in love with James Douglas,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
would kind of joke, Jamie, and my husband would always say, "Yeah, but I'm alive." But it is amazing when you start getting a feel for who these people were that lived
Mhm.
so long ago. Now, you've got quite an impressive list of accomplishments and awards, uh, and you're in the Historical Novel Society, correct?
Yes, are you?
Has I think I might have been at one time.
Yeah.
The last few years have been kind of a blur, a lot of changes, especially the last year and a half.
Mhm.
Um, so if I was, I don't remember, and I don't think I am now, although I think I'm on their Facebook group. But
Yeah.
I was kind of wondering, how has being part of an authors society benefited you?
Oh my goodness. Um,
Too many
it
ways to
it
count.
is Yeah, yeah, it's helped me enormously. First of all, it gives you definitely a lot of credibility.
Hmm.
You can learn so much at the conferences. The next conference is actually this coming summer, in Las Vegas at Caesar's Palace.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm really yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be really fun. Great venue. But there's always so many amazing classes you can take, sessions
Hmm.
that are given. Master classes in particular are just amazing. Sarah Pinner is going to be there this year. Um, I think, oh goodness, I'm trying to remember who else, but Margaret George, I don't know if you're familiar with her work.
I'm not.
Okay. She is one of the big grand dames of American historical fiction
Okay.
here in the United States. And she wrote the memoirs of Cleopatra. She wrote Elizabeth I. She wrote the autobiography of Henry VIII. A lot of those big figures, and she's big on biographical historical fiction, which I love. And so
Uh-huh.
she was always my favorite author. And would you believe we met face to face? We've become very good friends. And
That's great.
I know she wound up blurbing my first novel, Antonius, Son of Rome.
Oh, how
So, yeah,
exciting. Well,
to have
I've
a New
got
York
to.
Times best-selling author do that for you is like, wow, it's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. And I think that gives you a lot of credibility too. I mean, in a
Mhm,
way, should it? I don't know. But to have someone who knows history that well, I think that is uh, very impressive and gives you, as maybe starting author at the time, a lot of credibility. So, what is your best marketing advice?
Oh, wow. Right now, it's tough. It's
Hmm.
tough. Um, I would say transfer over to Blue Sky, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Get off of Twitter. Twitter has been such a disappointment since, it was remade into X. And I
Mm-hmm.
just haven't gotten the mileage from it as far as marketing. And, it used to be Twitter was the marketing tool for independent authors. And it's just
Now,
not anymore. Just
with
not.
so many people on either one, and I don't know how the numbers compare, but why do you think marketing changed, or the results of your marketing?
Well, I think we have had, whether or not I guess the US Senate wants to admit it, I think we've been through a recession in the last few
Mm-hmm.
years. And I think
Definitely.
yeah. And the first thing to be affected is entertainment, and that's what books are.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and I think between that and there being a huge glut in the market, it's just really affected my sales at least.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not alone because I hear the same thing from other people. And,
Well,
now,
definitely
so,
me. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So,
And
it's difficult, but, I don't even know the answer. Amazon ads used to work for me. They're not anymore.
mhm.
So I've just pulled the plug on that at this point.
No, I'm
Um,
kind of curious. I've wondered if part of what happened with my books, because they were selling well enough that I was on my way to quitting my day job.
oh, wow.
Although I love teaching music lessons, but I was making twice as much from the first book that came out as I was teaching music lessons 25 hours a week.
Mhm.
But I stopped marketing, thought I could coast, and sales dropped off. And at this point, it's been 11 years maybe since I released the first book. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering if part of what's going on is just that people are selling their used copies, so nobody's buying them new anymore.
Mhm.
But I do have some newer books out too, and they're just not selling as well. And I'm the
Yeah.
same person, I'm not working as hard because I was doing 18 hours a day, which, you burn out.
You do.
But yeah, so with marketing not really working the way you'd like it to, do you have another book in the works?
Oh, yes, I do. Unfortunately, I just haven't had a whole lot of time in the last couple of months to work on it, due
Hmm.
to my day job. But this is my last year. I'm going to be retiring, so I'm
Oh,
looking forward to that.
okay.
Yay! But yeah, and it's another American novel. It's going to be set in 1864
Hmm.
and deal with a woman who becomes captive to the Lakota Sioux. And she's an
Really?
immigrant heading
Hmm.
west, yeah, in a covered wagon, a whole
Hmm.
bit. And
Is
I'm
is it
basing
based on a true historical figure or
it's
complete
going to be
fiction?
loosely based this time on a historical
Okay.
figure. So I'm going to be using a lot more fiction, but there's going to be a skeleton of a plot there, and
Hmm.
I'm even changing some names. Um,
Hmm.
I ran into some issues with some descendants, and they didn't
Really?
seem real. Yeah, even that far back, you would think, wouldn't matter, but obviously it did, and I didn't,
How did
so.
this even come up? How did you get on their radar that you were writing about their ancestor?
Well, because I wanted to meet them. I wanted to
Mhm.
find out, if they had anything that they could share with me.
Okay.
And let's just say it kind of erupted in my face the way I didn't expect it to and didn't work out.
That's
And that's
hugely
too bad.
disappointing.
It is. It's terribly disappointing, especially when it involved another author. And typically,
Oh,
we
of
always
course,
help
yeah.
each other, you
Mhm.
know. Typically, we always help each other, but wasn't going to happen in this case. And I decided best to back off, change some names, and protect myself and my
Right,
story. And I
right.
can still
Do
use
you
plenty of the content. So yeah.
I
So
suppose even that far back, maybe they want to feel like they're protecting a reputation or
they
something
are.
like that. But
Yeah.
that's the only reason I could think of for objecting. And
Hmm.
I guess if you change the name, I mean,
Yeah.
let's face it, there's got to be a bad guy in a story, or it's not much of a story. Right?
And I can always make a statement in author's notes. That's a nice thing about historical fiction,
Hmm.
is I can just let people know, well, this was loosely based on several women that I've read about,
Hmm.
and I can list them, and that one individual will be in there. So So it
Right.
works out.
Okay. That's fantastic. And it sounds like you don't really expect to have that done soon, maybe until
No,
after
it's in
you
the
retire.
probably so. Yeah. I would say within the next year and a half, it'll be out. Yeah, I wish I could
Okay.
say that I'm a fast writer, but because I
Uh-huh.
work a day job, 40 plus hours a week, and I have
Yep.
performances and everything, it you know,
That
you do as
kind of
much as you
eats into the
can, but
writing time. Right.
yeah, it
Yeah.
does.
I I essentially retired about 3 years ago when when I married my husband. And I envisioned I'm going to have all day to write. It's going to be amazing. I'll get up just full of energy and joy in the morning and I will write for hours on end.
Yeah.
Didn't happen.
Didn't
We
happen. Oh
moved.
no.
No, because very quickly we moved out of his
Mhm.
house up to our property in Duluth. And then I was learning how to grow a garden. I was learning about companion planting. I was learning to raise chickens, which really is not as hard as they make it sound if you research it.
Mhm.
So then I was out caring for the animals. I was, driving down to Minneapolis to go to my son's wrestling meets. And since we moved to Tennessee, it's only gotten busier. And so I kind of laugh. We did finally, because now we have rabbits, chickens, and sheep.
Oh
And
wow.
so once we sold the previous house, we've put the money into hiring help. And he's great. He does fantastic work. But the problem is some of the jobs that need to be done really take two people, like finishing building our sheep shed or doing the fencing where we'll eventually
Mhm.
have Highland cattle. And so
Wow.
now, right. So now instead of being outside for an hour and a half a day taking care of the animals, sometimes I'm out there for 2.5 hours doing the fencing, the sheep shelter, and then he takes care of the animals after that.
And books
So,
don't write themselves, do they?
well, I keep lecturing my laptop every day before I go out to work on sheep shelters. Will you please write the book? And I guess in this day of AI, that's actually not very funny. You could,
Yeah, you
you
gotta,
know,
yeah. We have to be
I,
careful about wishing that, right?
right. No kidding. No kidding. So anyway, where can people find you online?
They can find me at brookallenauthor.com. They can find me,
And
I'm sorry.
I want to specify because I misspelled your name in the email I sent you because I didn't want to run back and check. And I thought everybody named Brooke spells it with an E on the end.
No, yeah,
So,
mine doesn't
but
have an E on the
yep,
end.
yep. So do not
So,
look for Brooke E. Allen. Look for
yeah.
Brooke Allen,
And
author.
there is a Brooke Allen with an E on the end who is an
Okay,
author too. So yeah, it's kind of, so yeah, Brooke without an E, brookallenauthor.com. And then of course you can find me on Facebook, on X, on Blue Sky, on, oh goodness gracious, Instagram. You can find me on BookBub, you can find me on Amazon, and you can find me on Threads now too. So.
that's a lot to keep track of.
It is, and I can't wait till I have time to do this. When I
Right,
retire,
right.
I'm going to actually try to create kind of a routine for myself,
Hmm.
because I really
Yeah,
want to be able to write full time.
I'm trying, but there's so many projects around here. I kind of have a routine, but you can find me, listeners can find me at booksandbrews.net, of course, and lauravosica.com. You can visit our sponsor, gabrielshornpress.com, and glenmerrillfarms.wordpress.com if you would like to see adorable rabbits and our handsome sheep. They're very beautiful. One of them is a St. Croix, so he's all white with this big white, I call it a beard, but it's down his chest. He's absolutely gorgeous.
Oh
So
wow!
yeah, I like him. He doesn't like me, but that's okay.
Well, I like you already because you're an animal person, and I have a dog, so we're dog people
Uh,
here.
Well, I almost was going to have to like give you the time out and run and let her out. We have two dogs and one is very elderly.
Mm,
As in I kind of go to bed half the time wondering if I'm going to have a dog when I wake up.
yeah.
She's 11 for a breed, almost 11 for a breed that only lives 6 to 8 years on average.
Oh wow! What
So
kind of dog is
yes,
she?
She's an Irish wolfhound.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So
They're huge.
yep. Well, she's small. She's the runt of the litter, but she's
Mhm.
still the biggest dog most people have ever seen.
Yeah,
So
for real.
yeah. So anyway, you can see all those wonderful animals at glenmurrellfarms.wordpress.com. And do you have any public events coming up that people might want to attend?
Not at the time. Boy, I did back in March when
Mhm.
West of Stanley came out, but I don't right now. I've got one coming up in February, but not until then. So
Okay. Well, people who are listening to this back in November can go look at your website closer to February and find out. I
yeah,
assume all that information will be there.
it sure should be. Yeah. And I
Okay.
can also, if you'd like me to send you a press kit type of thing, I can do
Yeah,
that.
you could do that. Yeah, and
Okay.
I can put a link or something on the video. So my upcoming events are mainly just that the Gabriel's Horn Press anthology has just been released in the last 24 hours. And so that is Startled by Music. And it is new poetry in traditional forms. So I'm really
Cool.
excited about that. And then because of all the crisis and upheaval in 2023, we're actually releasing both 2023 and 2024 this year. So the anthology on faith will be coming out within the month, I think. Yeah, it should be out within the month. So I would like to invite everyone to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, help us to grow this channel so that all our great authors can get more exposure. And thank you for being on